Well, good morning on this bright, pretty, sunshiny day. Good to see everyone out. We'll be in Genesis chapter 40 this morning. Before we start, we've got a review class coming up here in a couple of weeks to wind this thing down. And I'd like to encourage you to do a little exercise if you have time to work on it between now and then. Get you a piece of paper and like we used to do when it's in schools and number it from 1 to 50. We're going to have a test here. So just number it from 1 to 50. And write one line about each chapter in the book of Genesis. It can be a person and what he did, Abraham offered Isaac. It could be something like a general topic of the chapter, like the flood or whatever. Just make you a list from 1 to 50 and a brief outline of what it amounts to of the book of Genesis. We're working on that, and we'll look at it more in our review classes coming up. James, I'm not clicking. There we go. That did. All right, chapter 40 this morning. Let's do a really quick review. Joseph, 17 years old, and brought his father a bad report about his brothers and their tending of the flocks. Remember, Joseph is the favorite son, coat of many colors, and this caused a major jealousy problem with the other brothers. Had his dream, and they come back and said, when they heard the dream, said, "You think you're going to reign over us? We're going to bow down to you. You're going to have dominion over us." And it says they hated him. They hated him even more. Jealousy had turned to hate at this time. So he sent to Shechem to check on his brothers. They saw him coming. They put him in a pit. They were going to get rid of him. Wind up then settling to the Ishmaelite traders that come through. Took him to Egypt. Went back and lied to their father about it. Is your son's coat? Like innocent. I can just hear it in my mind what it might sound like there. And it said Jacob mourned many days for his son would not be comforted. So we mentioned last time that the storyline seems to have turned to Joseph here a lot, but don't forget Jacob. Jacob's the key character back here. It's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. From Jacob comes the promises. And so even though we're using Joseph to fulfill the storyline, Jacob is still very much important to the story. So then Joseph is sold to Potiphar, and 17 years old. I don't know what all to imagine about Joseph, what's in his mind, how he's feeling at this point. You got to think he's scared to death, what may happen. Bound in some way. Maybe read one thing that he might have an iron collar around his neck as they took him as a slave. So this young 17-year-old, I see Scott sitting on the back seat back there, about Connor's age, something like that. Okay, but close enough for comparison. Yeah. So imagine something like that and taken off. Pleaded with his brothers before they put him in the pit. Pleaded, don't do this, don't do this. And then he got against Egypt, and I have no idea that he knew the Egyptian language. I don't know. If not, he'd been there with a strange language to deal with. So Joseph is a tough situation. But the Lord was with him. That's the big key. The Lord has said that several times in the chapter. He was a handsome man. He's put in charge of all his father's house. Perhaps because he's a handsome man, Potiphar's wife wants to lie with him. Joseph refuses her, apparently, on several occasions. Because he's a long way from home. Nobody's going to know about it, so why not? Well, Joseph knew why not. Fled from it. She caught him by his garment, and he ran outside. Then she told that it was all Joseph's fault. Joseph was the one doing the advancing. a big lie she told to the men there in the house and also to her husband when he came back. So again, he's put in prison, and again it said the Lord was with him, put in charge of all the prison at some point then. And we kind of wound up with this slide here, the faithfulness. Think about the faithfulness. The big story here of this last class was the faithfulness of Joseph, even in his difficult circumstances. So that brings us to chapter 40. Chapter 40, it's a lot to read this morning, so I'm not going to read a lot of it. But the chief butler and the chief baker had offended their master Pharaoh, and he had put both of them in prison. They were put under Joseph's charge in prison. They both had a dream on the same night. Very similar dreams in lots of ways. They wanted someone then to interpret. Joseph goes in the next morning to see them. He sees their distraught face. They're concerned. They're worried about something. Joseph recognizes that. And so they want the interpretation. And Joseph says interpretations belong to the Lord. Joseph also had dreams. Remember that? Let's tie back into this a little bit here. So the butler's dream was he saw a vine with 3 branches, and it budded and it blossomed and it turned into grapes. And he reached up and squeezed the grapes, and he put the wine into Pharaoh's cup. In 3 days, you'll be restored to your place. The 3 vines, the 3 branches of the vine are 3 days. In 3 days, you'll be restored to your place, and you will again put the cup in Pharaoh's hand, just as you used to. But remember me when you get back there. He says, I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews. I've done nothing here. They should put me in this dungeon. Please remember me to Pharaoh. Help me get out of here. This translation says dungeon. Some say in this pit. So we can't think about it being a pleasant place where Joseph was confined here. So remember me when you get back. Help me get out of here. He asked the butler. So the bakers heard the interpretation of that dream and said, okay. He said, my dream was kind of like that too. He said, mine, I had 3 baskets full of baked goods on my head for Pharaoh, all kind of baked goods in the basket for Pharaoh. In the top basket, the birds were eating the baked goods that were in the basket. Joseph said the 3 baskets for 3 days. And in 3 days, you're going to be lifted up and put on a tree and hanged. Your head come off, and the birds will come and eat your flesh. Quite different dream from what the butler had. So 3 days later, it is Pharaoh's birthday. And just as Joseph had said, both of the dreams came true. The butler was lifted up and put back in his position of serving Pharaoh, and the baker is hanged. But the chief butler did not remember Joseph to Pharaoh. He did not. So that's the end of that first chapter break. Going right into the next chapter, 2 years pass between the 2 chapters. 2 years. That's an easy, short line for us to read. Well, 2 years has passed. If you're Joseph living those 2 years, imagine what that might be like. Hoping every day that something would happen that the butler might remember. It didn't happen, not for 2 years. 2 years later, after these dreams of the butler and the baker, Pharaoh has dreams. Pharaoh dreams that there were 7 fat cows, good-looking cows. They came up out of the Nile, and they were grazing there in the marsh grasses. And there were 7 thin, ugly cows that came up also. And the 7 thin, ugly cows ate the fat cows. But they were still thin and ugly, even after they did. There was a stalk of grain that had 7 big, full, nice heads on it. And then 7 more ugly heads, scorched by the east wind, came up on the same stalk. And again, the poor ones devoured the good ones, but they were no better off. So that was the dreams, 2 dreams Pharaoh had. So he calls for all the Egyptian wise men and magicians. Everybody come in and said, hey, I need an interpretation of my dreams. That nobody can interpret the dreams for him. And it's then all of a sudden that the chief butler remembers Joseph. So he says, Pharaoh, back when you were angry with your servants, me and the chief baker, you put us in prison. And there was this young Hebrew there. We both had dreams one night, and he could interpret our dreams for us. So he tells Pharaoh about this and how that exactly, as Joseph had said, the 2 dreams came true. So Pharaoh sends for Joseph. If you can interpret these other 2 dreams, you can interpret mine. And then the text says that Joseph shaves and changes his clothes before he comes before Pharaoh. So, raise a little sideline question for a minute. Why did Joseph shave before he came before Pharaoh? Well, you say, well, he's been in the dungeon. Obviously, he's probably pretty shoddy looking or something like that. Let me share something with you. I don't know if it's true or not. It came from the Biblical Archaeology Society article they had on exploring Genesis. So Pharaoh sent and summoned Joseph. They rushed him from the dungeon, and he shaved and changed clothes and came to Pharaoh. That's chapter 41, verse 14. Why did he shave? And what did he shave? And why does the text bother to mention it? The author of this says, I propose that this is a bit of tangible information is provided by the biblical author who was familiar with the customs of the Egyptian court and the Egyptian. See, people in most ancient Mesopotamia did not shave. Most people in ancient Mesopotamia did not shave. See, in contrast to the majority of people in the ancient Near East, ancient Egyptians were clean shaven. At least from the time of the Old Kingdom, 2600 to 2100 BC. The custom was for the men to shave beards and mustache and then wear a false goatee on special occasions. Foreigners can be distinguished from native Egyptians in many Egyptian tomb paintings by the presence of their full beards. The Egyptians are clean shaven. Most foreigners would have beards. By shaving his beard, Joseph immediately transformed himself from a foreigner to an Egyptian. The change foreshadows Joseph's acceptance of the court, as well as the fact that later Joseph's brothers failed to recognize him.